So my name is Rebecca Graves, and I'm the Educational Services Librarian at the Health Sciences Library, currently working from home, as you can see from the wall behind me. When I'm on campus, I'm at the Health Sciences Library that is at the south end of campus by the Stankowski Field. And my colleague is Janice Dysart, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, as Rebecca said, I'm Janice Dysart. I'm a science librarian over at the main library, Ellis Library. And like Rebecca, I'm mainly working at home right now, be in the library occasionally.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to plan. Did I just say that I was going to plan to be there on Wednesdays? I can't remember. You forget what you say sometimes. All right, so I'm going to kick us off. And so today we are looking at maximizing your research identity and impact. So we're going to be looking at different professional profiles you can have and different identification numbers and also other repositories where you can keep your research and data. And if you didn't get the handout or am not sure where it is in your email, if you check the chat, I believe Joe put a link to it in there. And that can give you quick reference to the URLs of the sites that we're going to. So I'm going to start out with the question, and since we're online, it's kind of hard. Usually we ask people to nod their heads or, say, agree. And if you want to put anything in the chat, feel free. You can actually ask questions. You can agree, disagree with what we're saying and stuff. Add your own experience. So how many of you have run into confusion over names? Like running into somebody with the same name, but actually it's a different person, somebody who's changed their name for a variety of reasons. Run into people who, different cultural conventions of how, if the personal name's first or the family name's first, people move institutions. They can even change in their area of expertise. So I'm assuming we've all run into these problems, possibly with colleagues, with students, with trying to track down researchers you want to work with, or even in your own personal experience. So one of the solutions to this is the Orcid ID number, or ORCID. And so this was created several years ago to allow people to have an individual ID number, or if you want to think of it as a universal or global badge. And so you can come to the orchid, so it's like the flower, but without the H, orchid.org, and you can register for an account. Again, I usually ask, and I might ask people to do that. If you would go under participants and show, like, say yes or no, like, do you have an ORCID ID? So if you want to find the yes or no and you haven't found it before, I think everybody's finding it, but if you click on participants from the menu bar, and then you'll see the yes or no option. Okay, so far no's are winning over the yeses, which is excellent. So you can actually do this now if you want to during the session. So you can go to orchid.org, which is on the website, on the handout, or orcid.org. And then you can actually go through and you can register. So if you click on that, and then you can, they say it only takes a minute. I actually haven't, well, I've created mine a long time ago and I don't remember if it really is literally 60 seconds, but it is pretty quick. So go ahead and do that. And for the three of you who've said that you do have one, do you know how much of it is public and how much of it is private? I'm actually going to log into mine. So in the upper right, which is usually where the login is, you can click on that and sign in. And I have actually told my browser to, well, I thought I told it to remember me. Well, it does remember me. So I'm going to sign in. And I'm going to show mine just to talk about setting up, and then I'll show somebody else's site. So when you're in OrcID, you can control whether it's public or private. So if I look on the upper right, there's an icon key or a legend where it shows the group of people, and green is anybody, everybody can see it. You can do only trusted parties if you want to restrict it, and then you can have it completely private to just yourself. And each part of your record in OrcID can be different. So you can decide what you're going to share and what you're not going to share. Because as we were talking about this recording, this session being recorded, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people want, I mean, some of us, want to share it, people can find us, you can find the information. But other people say, well, I have, there's good reasons why you would want to make that. So that's up to you. Some of these sections you will have to do manually, such as membership and service. That would be some searching program on the part of ORCID to be able to scour the web and find that for you, but other pieces can be at least semi-automated. So for example, the funding, if you click on add funding, it will actually, they have a dimension wizard. So if you look at that, if you click on that, it'll actually go through and say, do you want to authorize this to look at your record? And you can say yes or no, and then it can automate it and pull up new ones based on your ID. Also, if I go back, you can look at it and it'll say where it's pulling the information from. So depending on the funders that you get from, it can actually pull in information later on, and it can make it a little bit faster. And so then you can do this search and link. You can also always add manually. And I'm going to come down to works. And again, you can have ORCID go out and search, and it searches places such as PubMed. It searches for DOIs, so cross-ref, different repositories. And again, you can also make it manual. And you can automate this like I mentioned. So ORCID works with Crossref, and it works with, oh, I'm blanking. I need to check my notes because it always falls out of my head. DataCite, that's the one that falls out of my mind. So when you submit an article, or if you submit a data set, if you include just this OrcID number with it, then when the journal submits that article, that publication, to Crossref to have a DOI number put on it, your OrcID is embedded in that. And then so Crossref comes back here to OrcID to put your paper in here. So you don't have to do it manually, and it's actually automated. You do have to give that permission. If you don't do it right now, you'll get an email and then you can add it then. So this is actually we strongly recommend this, that you set up an OrcID number. And then if I come up here, I can search on, I'm going to search on Dr. Prue. So you can search on different people, different colleagues, and their number there'll be the number on the left and the name. And then this is what it'll look like in public. So you can see here the author or the researcher's name, their OrcID number. They have a Scopus ID number, which Janice will talk about shortly. And then you can see the employment in the different positions, education, and then the works that are here, and the DOI numbers, so you could get copies of them if you wish. And I'm going to scroll down, pardon for making you dizzy if it did. Down at the bottom, she actually has listed that she's a peer reviewer for 4 different journals. So that's another piece of information you can get. So if you were interested in being a peer reviewer, but you hadn't done it, you could see that Dr. Prue has done this, so you could contact her and say, hey, I'm looking at it, thinking about doing this. What does it entail? So another way that you can use OrcID is to contact people as well as having your information out there and having your information connected to you and to your body of work. I'm seeing that there are chats in here, so I'm going to pull it up. Okay, so so any questions on OrcID or getting it set up? Did you run into any problems setting up yours while I was talking to you? Okay. Hearing no questions. Okay, one person saying it was really easy, and that's good to hear because they have tried to make it pretty seamless. So the one thing is just remember remember that you can always go back to OrcID and you can track down your numbers. So now whenever you're submitting articles, papers, and some book chapters are getting DOI numbers now. And if you do a book chapter, so not everybody publishes in articles. Some people publish books or book chapters. So that makes it easier to connect it back to you. So, and if you do find, well, I published a book and it couldn't find it, you can always go in and put it in manually to have your body of work easily findable and all together and linked to you. And so now I am actually going to turn it over to Janice.
No, you've got one question there
Oh,
in
okay.
the chat about data sets.
That is a good question. And I have not worked with data sites that much. Janice, have you?
No, I mean, in Orcid, you would really just be doing the reference to the data set. It wouldn't be the actual data. So it would be, security would be with whatever site you actually post the data set on.
Yeah, and I know, and I'll be talking about our repository, MOspace, and we do have the option that you can embargo information, that some of it is not visible. So that is another piece. And also, we'll talk about Romeo Sherpa and Romeo Juliet, which are sites where you can go to find out which repository you need to use based upon a funder. And so my assumption would be that if you needed to put in a particular database, that they should have those levels of protection on there, like whether you embargo it for X number of years or this part of the information's embargoed permanently or like private or and there might be some that you actually have to de-identify before you store it. Okay, so next I will turn it over to Janice.
Okay, and we'll just switch over to my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was like not on sharing, so I will stop share.
Okay. Okay, as Rebecca mentioned, what I'm first going to talk about is another researcher profile, and that is the one that's set up by Scopus. And Scopus is a database that covers all different subjects, humanities, sciences, social sciences. So I have to say it's the weakest in humanities. It's not real strong in humanities. And it's a database that was created by the company Elsevier, which also publishes a lot of journals. And we subscribe to this database. And once you have published 2 articles that are indexed by Scopus, and Scopus indexes about 23,000 journals. So it indexes a lot of journals, not all of them, but that are out there, but quite a few. And I'm just in our database listing and I'm going to Scopus. And we'll do an author search. And I'm just going to do a physics professor. Kovikin, I hope I spelled that right. Okay. Sergey, University of Missouri physics professor, and I must not have spelled it right. Let's go back. Oh, I put an extra syllable in his first name. Okay. And from this, you can see that he's published under various names. So it would certainly be helpful for him to have an OrcID. He's published 86 articles that are indexed by Scopus. And to see his profile, since he's got over 2 articles, you just click on the name. And this takes you to his profile in Scopus. And this is all automatically created by the Elsevier people. And you can see he does have an OrcID, and they've put that up here. They list his affiliations, his subject areas. They do some nice charts. He's got 86 documents, and they'll be listed down here. Now, since this is automatically created, there's not a whole lot you need to do, but once you do have an author profile in Scopus, what you want to do is maybe once a year, you want to come look at your profile and make sure they got it correct, because they certainly try to do everything correctly, but certainly they can get names mixed up. The fact that he has an OrcID will help the Scopus people a lot with keeping all his articles straight, but they have been known to make mistakes. And if you see a mistake, you can go to the upper right-hand corner and you click on Edit Author Profile, and they will take you through steps to make your correction. Usually it's articles that have been attributed to you that you did not write, or in some cases they've listed your name in 2 separate profiles. And sometimes they seem to do that at the very beginning. They're not quite sure the article belongs to you, so they put it in a separate profile. And so that'll have like 1 or 2 articles in it, and your main profile will have more articles, and you can ask to have those profiles combined. You can see you can also connect to your ORCID account, and you can upload articles, citations to your ORCID record if you want to. If you see, if they're missing an article that you've written, if it is in an index, if it is published in a journal that Scopus indexes, then you can contact Scopus. I think in this case, you really have to write an email, send them an email, and ask them to add the article. And normally they'll ask you for a copy of the article so they can see exactly what it is. And I have done this for faculty, and they are very good about adding articles to Scopus that for whatever reason they missed. So that's really all you have to do with the Scopus profile. Is once you have one, is just review it. And they do make it, I mean, Scopus is it's a database we subscribe to, but Elsevier has made it so that if you end up working at an institution that does not subscribe to Scopus, you can still get on the web and you can Google like Scopus author profile, and you'll get a link that allows you to look at your author profile without being a subscriber. So you can still update your profile even if if you can't get into the full content of the database. You can still see your author profile and make any corrections. I have to say, through the years, Scopus is getting better and better about not making too many mistakes anymore about your profile, but they do still occasionally get some things wrong. So it is worth checking. Any questions on Scopus? Scopus profile. Not seeing anything in chat. We'll go on and talk about a few other things that you'll see in Scopus. One is this H index. And this H index is a relatively new metric that describes, well, it was invented about 15 years ago, and the person that invented it was a Spanish, well, I think he still is a Spanish physicist. And he wanted a metric, he wanted a numerical value to indicate both the productivity of a researcher and their impact. And his name is Jorge Hirsch. And so he came up with this index that he basically named it after himself. He called, instead of the Hirsch index, he calls it the H index. And so this is in the past, I'd say in the past 5 years or so, this has really caught on, and you'll see it quite a bit in databases and on the web. And what this is telling you is, since Dr. Kopitkin has an H index of 22, that means he's written 22 articles that have been cited 22 or more times. Now you can see from this, he's obviously written far more articles than 22. He's written at least 86, but only 22 of them have been cited 22 or more times. And of course, whether this is, is this a good H index? How does it rank? The only way to sort of get a feeling for that, unless it's a really large number, is to compare this H index with other H indexes for other people that are researchers that are in the same field and have been in the same or a very similar field, and they've been in that field for about the same amount of time as this person. Because obviously, when you're first starting out, your H index cannot be higher than the number of articles you've written. So if you've only written 3 articles so far, they could have been cited hundreds of times, but your H index can only be 3. So it is a little bit of an indicator of either how long you've been in the field or how prolific you are. I mean, some people may publish many articles per year, and that gets cited, and so their H index could rise fairly quickly. But this is computed by Scopus. You could do it yourself. We've got a guide that is, the link to our guide for this workshop is on the handout that was distributed, and it's right above our names at the bottom. And this covers the content we're covering today, plus additional content. But in the H index, you can compute that yourself. Once you've got some articles, you basically just create a little spreadsheet of your articles that you've written and the number of times they've been cited, and you just sort it so that the most cited comes out at the top. And you can get your citation counts from various things like Scopus or Web of Science. And then you just start counting down. And when the article number is greater than the time cited, then you drop back 1, and that is your H index. So for now, this anonymous person, their H index is 6. Now, if article 7 gets cited 2 more times, their H index would go up to 7. Or if article 8 gets cited 6 more times, it'll go up to 7. So over time, as your work gets cited, your H index will gradually increase. Any questions about H index? If not, we'll go back to Scopus, and I want to show you one other, actually another metric that you might be interested in that's kind of been gaining traction. Like the H index, it's really been in the last 10 years or so. And that is a metrics called Altimetrics. And Scopus contains some Altimetrics. The traditional metric through the years is as far as whether an article has, whether your research has impact or not, has been how often the article is cited. That's been the measurement up until now, and that's still, you'd say, the gold standard. But if you look at some of these alternative metrics, it's just giving you other ways the article can have impact. And I was looking, let's see. Let's come down. Let's look at this one. High performance clocks. If I look at the full display for the article, over on the right side of the screen, you'll see this little colorful graphic and this PlumX metrics. PlumX is the name of a company that collects what we're calling alternative metrics, and they're basically the different usage that you get of the article that's recorded in all the different social media interactions. So you can see it's it can be article views, it can be the number of tweets, it can be how many news articles are published about a particular research article. And in this case, PlumX, these little spokes represent different aspects of the altmetrics, and the bigger the circle gets, the more activity there is. If you click on this or click on the down arrow, you can see the different things that have been going on as far as usage with this article. Several people have viewed the abstract. It's been tweeted about. You can get more details about it by looking at this. They give you the details. Now, PlumX is just one company. Personally, I like another company that's called, which I think was the first company that started collecting all this different data, and that's because that company's name is called Altimetric. And it's got, we'll go and do a database called Dimensions, which actually is a database that just came out a few years ago. It's a freely available database, so you can subscribe to get more functionality. But we're going to access the free part. And it looks a bit like Scopus. I'm going to look up an article that was written by a University of Missouri professor a few years ago, and it got a lot of action through the social media. And in this database, you'll see these little colorful little rectangles that say altmetric and a number. And the bigger the number, the more activity there's been. And we're looking for this one. It's got, well, actually, yeah, let's do this one. The one that has over 1,000 metrics. And if I click, well, if I run my cursor over the box or the rectangle, you can see what's been going on, that this particular article, has been covered by over at least 92 news outlets. It's been blogged, it's been tweeted, it's been referenced on Wikipedia. And if I click on this, just like with PlumX, you'll get into more details. And you can actually, like, if I wanted to see what news outlets are covering this article, I can click on news. And to me, it's interesting, this article was written several years ago, but there are still some news stories coming out on it. So it's an article that's research that's had a lot of traction. And whether all this altmetric activity, what it means, it's hard to say at this point. It's a new enough area that they haven't yet decided what significance it has, if any. For now, it's really interesting. I think if you're writing, if you're doing research, it is interesting to see if anybody's talking about your research. It's something you can see a lot faster than waiting to see if an article's been cited, because that takes at least a few months to see that. Whereas something like altmetrics, you can see immediately what it's got. Whether it's going to, factor into promotions, getting hired, getting tenure, that remains to be seen. I would say certainly if I had written an article that had a lot of activity, a lot of people were looking at it, commenting on it, I would probably highlight that article. But it remains to be seen what it really means. But it is, to me, it's fun to see what people are doing. But of course, if your research is more, I guess, appealing to the masses, you're probably going to get a higher Altimetrics score. If it's very esoteric, very good research, but it may be very specialized and hard for the common person to understand, it's probably not going to get as much Altimetric stuff. And just real quickly, publishers are starting to get into this. And let's go back to Google for just a minute, just to show you one publisher site, because certainly once you get something published, it's worth checking the journal site just to see if they're collecting any data on your research. And I'm going to do one. This was an article that came out a few years ago that talked about a lot of insects disappearing around the world. And it was published in a journal called Plus One. And Plus One is sort of a journal that's been leading the way as far as collecting this kind of information on articles. And if you look at the article site, you'll see they have a metrics tab, and actually up in the upper right-hand corner, they summarize what they've been collecting on this article. And you can see this article, since it's been published a few years ago, has over 500,000 views. So certainly if I was this professor or researcher, I would probably mention that when I went up for a promotion, that this research really garnered a lot of attention. You can see in this case how often it was downloaded, which may be a little bit more of an indicator of impact than just viewing the article, the downloads. And so it's worth checking into. I know Elsevier has developed what they call their author dashboard that collects some of this information. If you publish articles in Elsevier, you'll get an account on their dashboard and you can log in and see what's going on. So it's a growing area. And it's not really something you can, I guess, control, other than, you can certainly tweet yourself you can tweet the article yourself. But other than that, all you can do is publish good research and maybe talk to the press and publicize your research a little bit, and it'll get more attention.
I'm going to piggyback on what Janice just said. I think it was through the hospital several years ago, they mentioned about if you want to publicize your research, like if you have research that you think is going to be big like this about the insects or about plants, you can, when you submit the article, before it's published, you can actually come up with some talking points about it. You can contact the campus publications department and say, hey, I've submitted this article, I've submitted this research to be published. I think it's important, and here's some information. And then they can actually put together information on you and that research or your lab and have it ready to go for when the article actually is published, when it actually appears to the public, whether the public is fellow researchers or just the general public. And that way you don't have to wait a week or 2 or 3 to get something written to put out in the press. You can actually push it out the same day that it launches. So that's another piece to be proactive. It might feel really pushy, but depending, if you have important research and your research is important, it needs to be publicized. It shouldn't, it should be picked up by other people. So there you go, back to you, Janice.
Well, I think I'm done. As you said, I think campus is and this campus, and I'm sure other campuses and other businesses are emphasizing doing that more and more, publicizing the good work they're doing and getting it out to the public. So if you stay in research, that's probably in your future. Kind of publicizing your own research a little bit and then seeing where it goes. And now I think we're ready for another profile that Rebecca's going to talk about.
Yeah, so Google. So if you unshare, oh, I guess I can.
Well, I can stop sharing.
Okay.
But you can
All
share.
right.
You can share without me stopping.
I was wondering that if I had the power to jump in there. All right, so next question to you all. So I asked you before, does anybody have a Google Scholar profile? So if you would go back into participants and say yes or no. I'll check out and see. All right, so there are some folks that have a Google, so it's about half and half right now of those of you replying. So, so that's pretty cool. So if you go to Google Scholar, scholar.google.com, and I'm going to also put in Sergey and search on him because even though I was looking at Dr. Prue before, but I want to compare the numbers. So when you search on a person's name in Google Scholar, if they have a profile, it should come up at the top. And you see there's this quill pen. And you can see he's been cited by quite a few folks. And if I click on his name, it'll come up with his profile. So you can set one of these up, and we have the link in there where you can do it. And again, it's free. So I mean, you do have to stop and think, well, how many profiles could I maintain? But the Google one's pretty easy for folks to find. And the Orcid one is, I think, necessary. So I would recommend those two at least. And you can have a photo, you can have your your location information, and then your areas of interest. And then it lists your work. So it doesn't go into everything like where you went to your education, where you peer review and such, like Orcid did. So it's more about just your basic information and your publications. And then on the right, it gives you your citation information. And I neglected to note down what his current numbers are when Janice was looking at them in Scopus.
His H index was 22 in Scopus.
Okay, thanks. I was like, because it's gone up 1, and it's gone up 3 in Google Scholar since I last took notes. So you can see that his numbers are similar. They're close, but they're not the same. So if you're using these two different profiles or programs, Scopus and Google Scholar, to track your information, you have to specify which one you're using, because if you flip from one to the other, the numbers will change slightly. And partly that's because of what they index. Scopus, as Janice said, they have a list of journals that they index. Google Scholar, at Google, they don't declare which journals they're indexing, so we can only guess or guesstimate what they have. So you don't have quite the list. So they likely have more journals that they're indexing or pulling information from than Scopus. Also, they will pull from books, book chapters. So if you lean more towards publishing in books, you might definitely want to look into Google Scholar and a Google Scholar profile. And when it comes time to tracking your impact, you want to check with your department and say, which metrics are the gold standard or are the preferred ones for this campus and this department? Do you use Scopus? Do you use Google Scholar? Can I put both on here? So you have to check and see what your local colleagues are doing. And you can see that they break it down here in the right-hand side of the screen by all of them, and then they break it down by since 2015. And then the I-10 index is how many citations how many publications with 10 or more citations in the last 5 years. So, which seems actually, yes, so that works because citations, and so that's actually a slightly different metric. So there's the I-10 and there's the H index. So when you mouse over it, you can see how many he has. So that one's not so much going up like, okay, he has X number of citations, so how many times have they been cited? Slightly different because, as Janice said, it used to be like how many times you've published and then how many citations those publications got. And then it was, so each time there's a new metric, then somebody says, oh, well, somebody gamed it, or we need to have a slightly different version. So you can actually go pretty deep into all the different metrics. So like the question about where do we go to find the gold standard or the preferred number for our department, which metrics are we charting? Are we only looking at citations and H index? Are there other pieces that we're looking at like Altmetrics? So worthwhile conversations to have in your department. And also it could be something you ask, like when you're interviewing, you'd say, hey, how do you, rank your scores? What type of metrics do you all look at when you're looking to hire and looking to promote? And so you can see the years. I actually pulled up my account, and so you can see you can actually add ones, you can add in articles, you can add it in manually, you can have it pull it up for you. It'll look for your name and pull it in and say co-authors. So, and then you can edit your photo and your university, etc. We recommend, actually Google recommends, and so I agree with them, that you use a personal account when you set this up, because then you don't, if you switch universities, like once you graduate or finish your postdoc, you don't have to change it if you go somewhere else. So if you don't stay here with us at MU, you don't actually have to change it up, and it stays with you wherever you go. So, I mean, you do need to have a verifiable university email address, so you can use both of them. So you have to verify that you're a professional, but you can actually link it to your personal one as well. Any questions on that? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. They walk you through the steps of setting it up if you want to create that. And I think I had buried my chat link, so I have to pull it out here.
I don't see any questions so far.
No questions so far. So Janice, did you want to?
Well, let me say, I'm going to talk just a couple minutes about some of the other profiles. And I think to do that, we'll go back to the guide, because there are quite a few profiles out there, and it's just up to you what you want to pick. So I'm going to switch back over to my.
Do you want me to stop?
And if I can pick the right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's go with this one. Okay. Going back to, this is the online guide we have for the workshop. And if you go back to researcher profiles on the left, you can see there are quite a few. We just talked about a few, the top 3 here at the top. But now there are additional profiles. Universities like the University of Missouri, they're creating their own profiles for their researchers. They want to publicize what their researchers are doing, and they also want to provide more opportunities for researchers to interconnect with each other. This particular profile for the university, and I'm sure for other universities, it's automatically generated by some software where you have to, on our campus, it's called MyVita. And if you're a faculty member, you fill out your publications and what you've been doing, your presentations and teaching and all that. And they draw on the information you enter into that record to create a profile. So you don't actively create your profile yourself, because they're also pulling that information for promotion and tenure. One that's pretty well known is academia.edu. This is a little misleading. It's not an educational site. It is a commercial site. And it's primarily used by humanities people. It's basically a social networking site for humanities people. And some people in humanities are telling me Humanities Commons is more useful for humanities people now. That's the one that people are using. And that one is not, I don't believe it is a commercial site. And then ResearchGate is the other one that you'll see all the time. And that's really a social networking site for both science and social science researchers. And again, it is a commercial site. I think quite a few researchers do find it useful. And it's probably just a matter of maybe, setting up a profile and trying it out and see if you like it or not. And if you like it, stay with it. If you don't like it, get off of it. And Biosketch is a profile that if you do research that's funded by the NIH, then you're going to have a Biosketch. But you can look at this guide and read about the details and see links to more information about all these guides. And as Rebecca said, we think, the most important ones are Orcid, and Google Scholar is very useful for letting everybody see your profile, no matter what their affiliation is. And then a Scopus author profile is, you should just track it to make sure it's up to date. And then whatever you do with the rest of these is, your personal choice. And I think we're ready to go back to you, Rebecca.
Okay. All right, so I will go back and let's see. So now we're going to talk about like storing. So there was a quote we mentioned, saving, repositories, and somebody had that question about privacy of human subject data. So that's actually a good question. And I will actually have to do some more digging on that. So locally, we have a repository called MOspace, and you have the link on the handout. And if you Google MOspace Mizzou, it will come up. It's mospaceumsystem.edu. You can come in here and search this by name, by topic, by community. It's actually a great place to store data, especially for students and graduate students, also for faculty. It will give you, I had like 3 different examples to search on here, and I'm like confused. Now I'm like, I don't know which one to pick. So I'm actually going to go with, sorry about that. I got overly excited by this I'm not sure I put my information here. So I will do Hunger Atlas, which is one that I usually do just to do a quick search on here. And it should pull up.
You might go into a little bit about what actually is in MOspace.
Okay, yeah. So I'm wondering, like, okay, why am I not getting this at the moment? Oh, because I had it on authors. I was like, why am I not getting this? All right. So let me go back because I'm just going to start over again here because I was playing in this earlier and didn't leave it set up the right way. So MOspace is a repository, as I mentioned, for faculty, staff, and students who do research to store their documents. So you can keep data sets in here, you can keep Word documents, you can keep audio files. And that reminds me of what I wanted to search, which was photojournalists into pandemics, because I wanted to talk about the different files that can be in here. So a lot of times people or students store their dissertations in here. And the reason we share this is because if you have data in here, you get a record in here and you get a URL. So this is a permanent URL for this document or these documents associated with this file. And then you can reference that on your website, on your CV. You can share with other people to say, if you want to see my work, here's the URL, you can go here. And you can see on the left the different types of documents they have here. So they have a WAV file, they have an MB file, they also have a PDF, and they have the JPEG for photos. So it gives you an idea of what you can have in here. And you can also have different metadata attached. And down below, it'll show statistical information. I'm not sure how much this one has been viewed, but it will show. Since this one's fairly new from is new from 2020. So another place where you can say, I have this information, it's stored here, you can access it, and then here's how much it's been viewed, looked at, and from where it's been looked at. So it's taking a while to come up, and that I'm like losing my train of thought. So our server's not responding, unfortunately. I'm going to click retry. Now I was looking for information on how you could protect your data as far as if it's human sources. And I did not find information on that. I know that you can have it embargoed so that it's not available for 6 months or a year, etc. So I will have to check into that, or you can actually inquire. I'm sad that this is not coming up to show the data of how often it's viewed. So I'll have to check on that, and we can send some information out to you all because we have your contact information about protecting data. And it could be one where you have to de-identify the data before you store it, before it comes to this part. So again, oh, I know what I almost forgot to say is that this database, the MOspace database, as many repositories are, is crawled by Google. And it's also indexed by another database or search engine called BASE, B-A-S-E, which stands for Belfeld Academic Search Engine. So the information in here should be discoverable in addition to you being able to share the URL. So it's a good place to store your, whether it's a poster, whether it's from a scientific conference, whether it's a paper, a PDF, photos, sound files, etc. You can store them here. And as far as how you submit the data, or your works, if you look in the upper right, you see that it says submit works. So you just click on that and follow the information. And if you want to, I said I'll go and look up the information about the privacy, but you can also click contact us and go directly. So that is our repository. We have it for faculty and staff and students, so there's no charge to you to put information in there. There are many other databases, repositories, and I'm sure you're familiar with some of them. I'm going to talk about Figshare. This is a, what do they call it? Freemium. So there's a free version, but you can pay to have more space, more options. So I'm going to browse in here on a fun topic. At least I think it's kind of fun. So somebody did research on basic math with monkeys and college students. So back in 2007. And here you can tell they are commercial interests, so they have a cleaner look perhaps. And on the right, you see the altmetric icon that Janice was talking about. So you can see that this article was picked up by 7 news outlets, and it was blogged and tweeted, etc. So you can see the metrics here. And if you scroll down, again, they also have a link. They have the DOI number for the journal, and you can get to the data on here. So, and then here's the records that were submitted in here. So you can check this out. You can say, do I want to use the one that's at MU? We would love you to use ours, but we also understand if you're like, well, I'm going to be leaving soon. Maybe I want to look at Figshare. Maybe I want to see what benefits they have for storing. And then also, you might need to use specific repositories. And so I am actually going to go to Google. Or I'm already in Google. I forget which browser. One of my browsers won't let me stay in Google. So there's 2 sites. One's called Romeo Sherpa and one's called Juliet Sherpa. Like Romeo and Juliet, the story. And Juliet Sherpa, so you can remember the URL. It's a little bit awkward for me to remember, but so it's just as easy to Google Juliet Sherpa. This one looks at the open access policy of funders. So if you're going to be working with grant money, you might want to know, well, what are my responsibilities around my data? Like how much do I have to have it open access? So, and you can see the tabs at the top, the Sherpa services, Romeo and Juliet. So Juliet looks at the funders open access policy, and Sherpa Romeo looks at journals open access. Like, do they allow you to keep a preprint and post it in our repository at MOspace? So I'm going to actually back out to Sherpa Juliet, click on that. So since I'm health sciences, I'm going to click NIH. And so if you click on that, it'll say, here's the funder, and they require open access, and they will say what to archive, when, and then where. And they want you to put it in PubMed Central. So you can find out if there's a specific archive or repository that you need to put your documents in based upon your funder. To go back up, let's see if I click here. No, that took me too far back. So pardon me while I back out. Oh, too far. And so now in Sherpa Romeo, so if I type in a journal, so it has a drop down. So if I want American Sociological Review, then it gives you the publisher information, and it gives these icons, and if you click on the plus on the right, it'll explain them. So you can see that this particular journal has an open access fee. So if you wanted it to be open access, you'd have to pay extra, or one way or the other, and that there's no embargo, and what their license is, and any conditions that they have, and if you're allowed to submit any preprints, postprints, etc. For open access. And so you can go through and search by journals in that. So those are 2 useful sites, Romeo Sherpa and Romeo Juliet, to see what possibilities do you have for sharing your research as far as journals go, and what requirements do you have for sharing your data as far as funders go. And we are close to time. So Janice, did you turn it back to
I
you?
will just talk very briefly about journal impact factors to wrap it up, since we are right around the hour mark. And let me go back to my screen. Let's go here. Oops. And you may have heard of journal impact factors. There is a widely held belief, whether it's right or not, that your work will maybe have more impact if you publish it in your articles in journals that have what they call high journal impact values. And there is controversy over that, whether that really means anything or not. But for now, it's still widely accepted, at least in academia, it's widely accepted that journal impact factors have some meaning. And journal impact factors are assigned by the database Web of Science. And they assign values, an impact factor to the journals that they index in their core collection. So not all journals have impact factors, just the ones that the Web of Science believes are the most important journals. And often you can go to a publisher website and you'll see the impact posted for a journal. We subscribe to a resource called Journal Citation Reports, which will give you that information. And I'm just going to go briefly into that. And we're just going to browse by journal name. And let me put in, let's do Policy Studies Journal. Whoops. Okay, allow pop-up boxes. And okay, it found the page for Policy Studies Journals. Its impact factor for 2019 is 3.797. And this is basically, you can sort of consider this as, it's the kind of the average number of times articles published in this journal are cited over the past couple of years. That's basically what you can view it as. And you go, well, is this good? Is 3.797 good? I don't know. I'm not, my area is not policy studies journals, but to see if it's good, you can look and see how it's ranked among other policy science journals. And to do that, you come, let's see, this resource kind of makes it hard for you to find this stuff, I have to say, but you first go to all years. We see 2019. There's also a 5-year impact factor, which might have a little more meaning. And you can see it's a little higher. It's 4.224. And if you keep scrolling down, you will get to rank. And clicking on rank, you will see that this journal is actually, has been put into 2 subject areas, political science and public administration. And its impact factor makes it, ranks at number 10 out of 180 journals in political science. So it's in the top quartile. So that's very, very good. And also it's in the top quartile in public administration. It's even ranked even higher. It's 6 out of 48. Now, if you wanted to see these journals, what other journals are in that area, you can scroll back up to the top. This has a lot of other values in here, but people really don't care about all these other values. They just want the impact factor and where it ranks in a particular discipline. So we'll click on public administration and you'll see the top journals in public administration. So another useful purpose of journal citation reports is you can browse by subject area. So I may not even have a journal in mind, but I can browse and look at the public administration journals and I can just browse through them and see which ones are considered the highest ranked journals in this particular area. Now, impact factor, like H-index, is very relative to the subject area that you're in. In this case, the top journal in public administration or public policy has an impact factor of right around 5. If we go into a medical field, let's do a big medical journal, England Journal of Medicine. You can see that its impact factor. Oh, I don't
It's
know
blocking you again.
oh, well, I cleared it. Oh, shoot.
So if you,
I thought it was clear for the rest of my browser session, but apparently not. Okay, we'll try it one more time. Now you can see New England Journal of Medicine. It has an impact factor of almost 75, which is a big difference. And that really has to do with the different fields, how many researchers are in the field, how often they cite each other's research. And of course, biomedical is a huge research area. If I looked at it's in the category medical or medicine general. If you looked at that, you'd see that New England Journal of Medicine. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not showing the rank. Well, New England Journal of Medicine is the highest ranked journal in this category. And 75 is one of the highest impact factors I've seen. I think there are some higher ones, but most are average, under 10.
Mhm.
But it's just something to pay attention to. People talk about it, and so you can look up the impact factor. As I said, they're often on the journal website, and you can see if it's highly rated, or just even if the journal has an impact factor, that's still an indicator that it's a quality journal, because Web of Science is very selective about what they index. So just something else to keep in mind when you're trying to increase your impact of your research. And I think that is basically it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So
Now we
thank you
have
for
to-
your attention, and feel free to reach out to us when and if you have questions.